Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison and I'll be your host for the evening. I'm the Director of Programs with NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness for North Carolina. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and really building community on the topic of mental health. I'm glad you're here. Our guest tonight is an author who lives right here in North Carolina. Her name is Hope Andersen. She recently published a survival guide for folks who live with bipolar disorder, alcoholism, or both. Her book is called How to Remodel a Life, and it approaches recovery like a home renovation. Through that lens, she tells her story with depth, insight, and candor. I'm so jazzed about our conversation tonight with Hope, which will begin in just a moment. As usual, the first half of our show will be an interview, Hope and I asking questions and Hope answering. Then we'll show our video of the week, followed by questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience, and perhaps folks who are watching on Facebook Live. That's a new outlet for us, so welcome anyone who's watching us on Facebook. Now, a word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Services Block Grant Fund. I have to tell you, I always kind of trip over that federal community. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it's neither here nor there. We do appreciate their guidance and support this week, as always. Now, without further ado, Hope Andersen is an author, a poet, a coach, and she's drawn to stories of transformation, both in fiction and in life. A firm believer in all that is possible, she presents a realistic approach to dealing with life on life's terms. She lives near Charlotte with Tom, her husband of more than 30 years. Welcome, Hope.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So you cover a lot of ground in your book. Tell us your story in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, it's the story of my story growing up with bipolar disease and alcoholism, and what I did to, or what I do to manage it. That's basically what it is.
Okay. And you tell it in such an engaging way because you're so honest. Walk us through the process of remodeling a life.
Remodeling a life is a lot like remodeling a home. You have to take it piece by piece. You have to really get honest about what the problems are that exist, and then take it in small bites. Really looking at what needs to be changed in your life and attacking that in a way with all the tools that you can to allow change to happen. I guess that's the best way to put it, is allowing change to happen. And the part of that is being willing really to surrender your difficulties to the universe, I would say, to something greater than yourself, or to people outside yourself, to those people around you. When you're trying to remodel a house and you want to reframe a room, you probably go to a carpenter. You don't try to do it yourself necessarily. So when you're remodeling a life, perhaps what you seek is outside help from nutritionists or psychiatrists or personal trainers, or all kinds of people. So what goes into remodeling a life is a lot about asking for help.
Right. Well, in the book, I like the way you approached, you start with the foundation, you're clearing the dirt, clearing the dust, and then you address plumbing and wiring and raising the roof. So it made it very concrete. And you always had like a clear analogy of what that aspect of recovery was. Like the
Well,
one,
that
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the way that it came about was at this time 2 years ago, I was working in a bookstore and I noticed that there were all kinds of books about renovation and about self-help. And I thought to myself, what if we put those two things together? When you do have renovations, you see these shows all the time. The Property Brothers and all those things with them knocking down these houses and starting from ground zero and building up. And that's basically what you have to do with your life is start from ground zero and build up and find those areas where or focus on those areas in your life where um, yeah, you're putting in new windows to let light into your life. You're fixing the faulty plumbing where you were eating bad foods and putting bad things into your body, negative thoughts, and you have to clear those pipes and raising a roof and putting on giving yourself the kind of shelter that you really need to have in a life. Building a guest room and inviting the appropriate people into your life, not the unappropriate or inappropriate people into your life. And a big part of remodeling a life is at the very end where I talk about play. It's so easy for me to take myself so seriously and um, because I've had a lot of bad things happen to me in my life, and it's easy. I have this disease that wants me to think negative thoughts, and I have to practice positivity. And so the whole notion of playing is like a really important notion to me that every day try to see the magic in the world. There's so many miracles out there. There's so much magic. There's so much possibility. And if we can turn to that and turn to affirmation and turn to what is possible in our lives rather than focusing on what seems impossible, I think that's where the growth really occurs.
Mhm, mhm. And to give people a sense of your background, you grew up with a father who was a pastor. I remember a
Yes, an
description
Episcopal priest. Yes.
of, okay. And you shared a bedroom with many sisters in a dorm room. Is that right? For a while?
Well, I have 5 sisters, and when we were growing up as little girls, we lived at a boarding school, and we shared rooms together in the uh, first floor of this um, dormitory. And yeah, and the when we moved up the hill to the new house that we got, that's when I had my first room of my own. Um, and that was always a very important thing to me to have space of my own where I could just go and kind of escape from everybody. And um, because I think alcoholism and bipolar disorder are both diseases of isolation, and I know I don't particularly like being around people. I don't I'm not a I'm not necessarily a people person. And I I had to work on that. I've had to work on that a lot. But anyway, enough of that. That's
Well, I'm an introvert, so that I can understand that. I certainly need time to decompress after any
yeah.
amount of time with other humans. So
Yeah.
understood, understood. Okay, and so one thing I noticed immediately was your candor, as I've mentioned, and you described your former self as self-centered, manipulative, arrogant. Are you hard on yourself? Is that rigorous honesty?
I think in a way that's a sense of in one way I think it's rigorous honesty, but in another sense I think it's false pride. Because one of the things I've learned through my recovery is that um, life is all about balance. It's all about, you know, the 3 bears and having just the right size bowl of porridge, you know, not too big, not too little, not too dramatic, not too whatever. Bipolar, we're always going off the deep end or down in the dumps. And unless you're on your medication, which you really must stay on, and then you get to be balanced. And then that seemed boring, so you go off it and you're starting the cycle again. So that's not good. But I think that whole concept of being balanced and being normal, being just another bozo on the bus, is like a really important concept for me to embrace, and like I said, not to take myself so seriously, and not to judge myself too harshly. I say it in the book a few times that um, I always respond much better to a hug than to a stick. And I really believe that humans respond much better to love than punishment. And my whole concept of a higher power is based on that loving higher power that wants the best for me and wants me to be happy, and you know wants us all to live in peace, and is not a punishing, vindictive kind of higher power that wants war and all that. We're not meant to be fighting with each other.
Yeah, I read your story, and I've been working on my own story, and I thought, well, I could really include a lot more candor. It was sort of like uh, I made myself look pretty good, and I thought, well, I should probably be more honest and forthright with my story.
Well, I
But-
think one of the things about getting sober and um, and dealing with bipolar disorder, and for me that was, I got sober first, and um, that was almost, I mean, I think I had bipolar disorder before I was an alcoholic, and nobody knew it. They just thought I was dramatic. I just had these mood swings and was just kind of a creative, dramatic kid. And so that went undiagnosed until I was in my 40s. But in the meantime, in my 20s, I got sober, and it was kind of easier to put down the alcohol than to deal with the mood swings. But one of the things about getting sober is you really can't get sober unless you're honest with yourself. You can't, I don't care whether you're getting sober or you're just trying to live a better life, unless you can be honest with yourself and see who you really are. It's very, very hard to change. And honesty doesn't have to come all in a sweeping tidal wave of recognition. My own um, relationship with honesty has been like peeling off the layers of an onion. Over the years, I've become more and more honest with myself, and more has been revealed. And and I think that's why I could write this book at this point in time, whereas I couldn't have written it before, because I wasn't able to see some of the stuff that I was able to see. In fact, writing some of the things that I saw, one of the things that I learned during writing this book was just how awful I was to my first boyfriend,
Oh,
because I turned him into something that I wanted. I didn't let him be who he was. And that made me so sad when I had that realization, just that I had treated him so selfishly, and I mean, he was probably just a good kid who was living his life, and along came this wild woman who who kind of, swept in and took over and whatever. So, yeah.
yeah. I think most, well, I certainly can say I've had that insight into myself where I've in a friendship or a romantic relationship and realizing this is what I need, so this is what I'm going to see. Yeah, this is what I will acknowledge and affirm, and the rest of you is going to blend away.
Right.
So I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So you mentioned it was years on the topic of honesty and relationships, years before your sisters would talk to you on the phone. and decades before those relationships were really healed. And that is so common in the mental health community. We all have burned bridges behind us. How did you make that much progress with your sisters?
Well, I think, first of all, they're not all healed yet. I have 5 sisters, and one of them doesn't talk to me, um, because I wrote books like this and some of the novels I wrote, and she thinks I'm, letting people know too much about our lives, and she takes it personally. So, um, she won't talk to me. But anyway, that's all right. Um, but anyway, I think just showing up, just showing up, sending birthday cards, acknowledging anniversaries, sending Christmas presents, inviting people to come and stay, um, showing up for weddings and showing up for funerals and just showing up and not having expectations of people, not expecting them to come around to my way of thinking, knowing full well that I had a big part in how they respond to me. Um, and it must not have been easy. I think telling them, letting them know, making amends to them and letting them know that I acknowledge that it must not have been easy living with me as a bipolar kid who was so demanding and so um, just so wanted my father's attention all the time and really took him away from my other sisters. And um, it just acknowledging that stuff and being honest with them and letting them know that I'm very sorry that I hurt them, and if they would like to have a relationship with me, I'd love to have a relationship with them. And so now we're like on, one sister I'm extremely close to, 2 sisters I talk to frequently, one sister I am in contact with, and then the other one, I send her a Christmas card and a birthday card and that kind of thing. And but I don't want to push her. I don't want to insinuate upon her space, because if she doesn't want to have a relationship, then I don't want to be poking at her, and making things worse. That's not fair. That's not nice.
So you're kind of respecting her boundaries, but doing your
Right,
part.
right.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes perfect sense. So, one quote that jumped out at me as you were talking about making the big change in your life: desperation is a critical element in laying a firm foundation. I love the humor in that remark, but it speaks to that rock bottom, which is very real in the alcoholic community. Do you think that rock bottom is part of grappling with addiction, or is it human nature?
I think anybody who wants to live a better life, who wants to find out who they really are, which I think is what the goal is here. I think the goal is for us to be the people that our higher powers, our God, our whatever you call it, wants us to be in life. And I think a lot of us live lives that aren't authentically ours, and we live in suffering, we live in pain, and we try to hide behind a million different things, to avoid looking at who we really are. And I think that in order to really break through those walls that we've built up around us, we have to hit rock bottom. And everybody's bottom is a little bit different. My bottom as an alcoholic wasn't as bad as somebody else who might have been drinking for 40 or 50 years. I got sober when I was 25 years old, so I had only been drinking for 10 years. But I knew that in my heart of hearts, my soul was broken. I I just felt deep despair. I was suicidal. I couldn't go on. And it when you get to the point where you fall to your knees and you say, "Help," that's when I think change can begin to occur. And I think that for anybody who really genuinely wants help, there is help. And I think that's what my book is trying to tell everybody is if you want help, it's out there in all kinds of forms. There are so many tools you can use to get a healthy life, to get the life you've always dreamed of, even a better life than you ever dreamed of. Um, just there are so many people who are willing to help you out there, and so many avenues you can take to improve your existence, and and in all sorts of ways. Um, and if you're willing to ask for help and to accept help, then you know then the games begin. Okay, and it's about simple things like today I had to send something to about my retirement to the government, and I hate fax machines and things like that. I hate technology, and I also don't like not appearing smart. So I had to ask my husband for help, and I had to stand back and let him do it, and and be okay with it. And I was okay with it today. I was okay letting him help me. In the past, I would have insisted on doing it myself, broken the machine, done done all that stuff, done it wrong, gone, had the thing persevere forever, and not gotten what I wanted done. So, I mean, that's just a little example. But, you know, what I find with that particular topic is that if I am, there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I think when I am really ready to change or to have something changed in my life, like when I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, when I am sick and tired of being overweight, or I'm sick and tired of being out of shape, or I'm sick and tired of smoking cigarettes, or I'm sick and tired of going out to bars at night and getting home drunk, passed out, whatever. Um, all I need to do is to ask for help, and then things can start changing. And I know that from my own experience because when I asked for help, then I saw in hindsight how all these little things worked together to get me to where I am today. And it all makes perfect sense. It's just synchronicity. Um, I mean, I don't, even with this thing with the letter going off to the government today, I had filled the form out wrong first time and it kept on coming back to me. And that was actually a good thing because I had filled it out wrong. And my husband showed me today, you filled it out wrong and we need to correct it. So if it had gone out wrong, we would have been screwed. But he filled it out right. And, hopefully it'll all be good. So it's all synchronicity. It's all the universe is really working for us, not against us.
I do love those days where it feels like things just come together and you have that
Yeah,
flow. I
yeah,
understand that. So there's a lot of courage that comes through in your story with your honesty. And one theme was sexual promiscuity. We know that hypersexuality is, in fact, a symptom of bipolar disorder. Did you feel like your mental health condition affected your sexual behavior?
yes. I was under the influence of alcohol. I was, there's a four-letter word for it, but I just was very promiscuous. I just was beyond the pale when I was drinking. And and it led me into places where I shouldn't have been, where I got into trouble because I shouldn't have been there. And then I had to grapple with the guilt that I felt when I got raped, okay, or when I got gang raped. I I grappled with that feeling like, "Oh my God, I brought this on myself." And that's not true. That wasn't true. Those situations that occurred because those men were pigs, basically, and they shouldn't have done that to me. And but you know, you have to deal with all that garbage when you've got that kind of stuff going on. When you're leaving your drunk husband. My first husband was also an alcoholic, and I'd leave him drunk, passed out on the bed, and I'd go down to the bar and pick up men. And that's not a good thing to do. That's not a good thing to do. And I just I had I don't feel any remorse or guilt or anything like that about it anymore, because I've talked about it and I've worked on it, and I've been married for 30 years, and with one brief explosion that happened when I had a manic episode, everything has been calm and copacetic between my husband and me. So, um, I just I feel like I left that old girl behind, and I don't have to deal with her anymore. So,
Mm.
but I do feel that hypersexuality is definitely, if you listen to people tell their stories as alcoholic women, that is a thread that runs through a lot of alcoholic women's stories.
Indeed, yeah, because you find yourself vulnerable and in
Yeah,
those situations, and there is evil in the world. There are predators in the world.
yep.
I'm so sorry you went through that, and I'm so sorry so many women go through that, and men. Um, but you're here, a survivor of the first order, and you've shared your story, which is refreshing in its courage and stick to itiveness, as they say. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of really positive comments are coming through in the chat box, that folks saying they're glad you got help and your honesty is so refreshing. So I always like to let our speakers know how nice our audience is. So that's coming through. Um, so you were talking, moving on a little bit, you were talking about how you know when you need to slow down, and what you wrote is, if I am listening to stuff in my head that is untrustworthy and suspect, I get angry and morose. I just love the way you put that. How do you know which thoughts are untrustworthy and suspect?
Well, I live a very I live a life like a piece of lasagna. It's just kind of like very low little ripples. I mean, I'm bipolar, so I still have little ripples, but I just have little ones. And there's nothing, my life is very peaceful. It's very calm. And I know when I start to drop things, or I start to lose things, or I start to get frustrated with things, or I'm yelling at the dog, or I'm um, short, my temper gets short, or something like that. I know that there's something wrong. There's something going on with me. And I need to look at it, and I need to pull back, and I need to talk to someone, probably my sponsor, and I need to, you know, get a grip on what's going on, because if I let it go, it can get out of whack. But it's a visceral feeling. I mean, if your life has changed and you've become a new person, you've been basically reborn into a new life, which I feel like I have. Then when the old life intrudes on you, you feel it. It's like having a blister on your foot, or a splinter in your finger. It you feel the pulse of it, and you know it's there and it's bothering you, and you can't ignore it. So you have to do something about it. And that's kind of how it is with those suspect feelings.
Mhm.
Yeah, because my life is so I love my life today. I have such a great life. I run around right now. I'm running around most days singing Christmas carols in my head. I hear Christmas carols going in my head all day long, and I'm, burning balsam fir candles and cinnamon candles in the house so it smells beautiful, and everything is calm and bright, and my relationships with my kids are great, and my relationship with my husband is great, and I have friends, and I have a thing that I love to do. I love to write. I'm working on more books, and I work on poetry, and I just have this peace, this serenity in my life that I never thought I could have when I was trying to slash my wrists and, thinking about driving into trees, and, that chaotic life, um, is so far behind me now. And all because of using the tools that are in my book. Um, and that's why I wrote the book, because those tools are, I have 39 years that I've been sober. So that's 39 years of accumulated wealth,
Yep.
lessons, life lessons, wisdom, things that other people have taught me and I've learned and practiced. And I just really wanted to share that with people who maybe they don't want to go through a program. Maybe they don't want to go into detox, or they don't want to go into rehab or something like that. But I just thought this book would be a way to, in a nice way, a kind of humorous way, but also an accessible way, reach out to people and say, you can change your life. You have it within your power to remodel your life to end up with the house of your dreams, the life of your dreams. Um, it can all be so good. So
Indeed. I definitely caught the 12-step language, the spirituality, the higher power. Actually, that leads to my next question. Your view of God does reflect that 12-step philosophy of a power greater than yourself. You also had another name for God when you were younger, Mr. Riley. Tell us about
yeah.
that.
Well, when I was a kid, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and I used to hang around him all the time because I just doted on my father, and I would go to church with him all the time. I would go to services with him twice on Sunday, and on Wednesday I'd be at evensong with him, and I worked as an altar girl and all that stuff. And but I never really bought into Christianity. That's all I can say. I mean, I know that might offend some people, but I just never did. I never could believe that story. But I believed in God, and I knew there was something outside myself that heard me, that I could speak to, and that would speak back to me. So I would go for long walks in the woods at our right outside our house, and I would sit on a log, and I would have these long conversations with Mr. Riley, which was what I called my higher power at the time. And we just were friends. And he helped me through many years as a teenager of being absolutely distraught, through many, many times when I just felt like there was nobody. That voice, that presence was in my life. And when I started drinking on a regular basis, he disappeared. And all my spirituality disappeared at that time until I got sober again. And then it came back in a different form, not Mr. Riley anymore, but a different God that has grown and changed as I stayed sober. Yeah.
Was there a Mr. Riley that you knew in person somewhere? I always was curious where the name came from.
No, I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it came from. I'm fairly creative, so I guess it came from.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So we have time for one more question. We're almost at our halfway point. Um, what are some of the stereotypes or misconceptions about bipolar disorder do you see, and what impact does stigma have on people who live with it?
Well, I think one of the stereotypes um, that people have is that people are that a number one, that mania is fun, that being manic is a fun thing. And being manic is not fun, I can tell you that right now. There's a tiny moment, just like taking the first drink. There's a tiny moment when it maybe feels fun. And then after that, it's scary. I found it scary, very scary, because you're living in a non-reality. And the same thing is true of depression. Depression can maybe feel a little cozy when you're kind of wrapped up in your blankets. But when you really get down into the depths of depression, we're talking about Dante's Inferno kind of depression. That is that is not fun. That is not fun at all. And romancing bipolar disorder is something that I think happens. And so the the one thing that I would like to say is that it's very important if you have bipolar disorder to take your meds because it's it's curable. It's a disease that you can treat. If you have bipolar disorder and you get on the right medication, you can treat your bipolar disorder and you don't have to suffer. You don't have to feel those intense highs and lows, and you can be a productive member of society. And I think sometimes people think that people with bipolar disorder can't be productive. And that's not true. There have been lots of people who are bipolar who have been very productive and have been giants in our society. And you know, I think that's another stereotype that that's an excuse. That's a lame excuse if somebody has bipolar disorder and they say they can't do it. That's just not having a willingness to stick with your meds, take the prescribed treatment, and go on and deal with life on life's terms, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I liked you had sort of a three-prong approach to recovery, which was honesty, faith, and medication. And that made a lot of sense to me. And that I haven't heard that before, at least not put that way. You also mentioned a seductive quality of darkness. And I don't think most people pay attention to that, but that's true, especially if you're sort of an artsy person or you're an intense person. Um, that darkness can be associated with depth. There can be a little bit of charisma to it. But when you go too low, there's nothing creative about that drama. It's just darkness. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, all right, very good. Well, we have come to the halfway point. We're going to wrap up the interview portion of our show for right now. And before we move into our video of the week, I want to thank our behind the scenes helpers. We have, as always, Eddie Simmons, our fantastic tech guru intern, um, our psychiatric nurse who helps us out, Gail Pruitt, our executive director, Gary Kreitz, who's just always there behind the scenes being supportive. And of course, thanks to Hope for joining us tonight. Now our video of the week is sticking with our theme of bipolar disorder. This is an excerpt of a poem called Choices by a Nigerian-born poet named Bassi Ikpe. She is a writer, spoken word artist, and a mental health advocate. I hope you like this as much as I did. And now Zoom is opting not to show it to me, so let me make sure I get on the right page and we can enjoy this. There we go. Now, just to make sure this goes correctly, I'm going to back up and hit my screen share one more time because I want you to have the full benefit of this awesome video and I want this to go smoothly. All right, let's check this out. I just love this.
Maybe this is about choices, about the pills hidden in your underwear drawer, about 4 hours in the gym, 2 weeks of only water and power bars. So this is about shame, about finally admitting that things aren't okay. This is about saying, now that you know the truth, will you please love me anyway? Because this is about humility and admitting that you need help and sleep and hugs and permission to cry despite the strength you are often accused of. This is about relinquishing control, taking a breath, stepping back. This is about 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., still no sleep. The glow of a television, you bathed in sweat, tears, the need for noise, the quiet that can find you, and the chaos that only keeps you moving.
Okay, that poet again, Nigerian-born poet Bassey Ikpi, Bassey Ikpi. And I just love her, the way she presents herself and the way she speaks. Okay, so now at last it is time for your questions, virtual studio audience. If you want to ask a question, there's a Q&A icon towards the bottom of your monitor. And click that, type in your question, and it will be magically be delivered to Hope and myself. All right, we've got one already. Hope, if you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self something, what would it be?
Ooh. If I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self something, it would be to, oh God, it's so hard because my 18-year-old self was so screwed up. It would be to love myself, to trust and to love myself, rather than to hate myself so much, which I did at that time.
When I ask myself that question, I tend to have a similar answer. And then I think, can I push myself to do that now? Can I be more patient and gentle with myself now? It is always a challenge. I'm one of those people who has an inner critic. Please feel free to keep the questions coming, virtual studio audience. We've just had the one so far. We did have some other questions that were left over from earlier. What gives you hope, Hope?
What gives me hope? A lot of things give me hope, but nature gives me hope because I don't know if you know the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, but he wrote a poem called God's Grandeur. And that poem is all about the power of nature, and poetry gives me hope. Looking and seeing the miracles in mindfulness gives me hope. Paying attention to what's in front of me gives me hope, because if you pay attention to what's really there and not to what's going on in your head, you notice that the violets are blooming out on the lawn right now. And you see the robins that are around, even though they shouldn't be, even though it's December. And you notice that these things are happening. And pretty soon the forsythia buds will be out on the forsythia bushes. And nature keeps doing what nature always does. And no matter how screwed up man tries to be around all of this, nature, I believe, will prevail. And that gives me hope, because it just, we have such a beautiful planet here. We have such an opportunity here for Eden. And I don't know, I find Eden in many different things. I want to just read a little poem I wrote if I can find it.
Great.
Okay.
That's
It's
actually
called,
one of our questions.
okay. This is called Wild Horses. If I were planning Eden, I'd make it look like this: a field of 30 horses, maybe more, heads bowed deep in the grass, grazing between clover and bees. They swish their golden tails at summer flies, while one, a muscular beauty, sleek and black, gallops by. And it's just as I saw that one day when I was driving down the road. That's what I saw. And it's like noticing things like that gives me hope, because it takes me out of myself. And when I can get out of myself, that gives me hope.
Yeah, it reminds me of a haiku, the very clear, calm setting, and then the movement at the end. Um, yeah, very, very wonderful imagery. And nature does strike that chord of hope and resilience that I've certainly gotten a lot out of over the years.
Mm.
All right. So, what book has had the greatest influence on your thinking and or your life?
Oh my God. What book? There are so many, but I probably would have to say the Bible. Even though I'm not a big Bible thumper and I'm not particularly religious, I love the Psalms. I love the stories. I love um, I love Elijah. I love Isaiah. I love the voices, all the voices of those people in the Bible. And there's a lot of other books that have meant a lot to me. I'm a pretty avid reader. Um, Everything from How to Stop Worrying and Start Living to the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, and the Big Book of AA, and um, but I'd have to say probably the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I have a feeling your father is smiling somewhere. So, how long did it take you to write your first book? Did you handwrite or use a computer?
I always handwrite my books, and then I have to go through the process of transcribing them, which is a pain in the neck, but that's just the way I do it. So my first book, um, the way that this all happened was I was a teacher for 25 years. I was a writer in my early 20s before I got sober. And then I stopped writing, even though I'd been published and had a play produced and all this stuff. And I stopped writing when I got sober because I thought I couldn't um, write and be sober at the same time. So I became a teacher, and I taught for 25 years. And then I did not like it. It was not really what I was supposed to be doing. And then when I turned 60, my husband had gotten very ill with liver cancer, and he he was on the transplant list for a number of years, and we waited in Charlotte and weren't getting anywhere. So we went down to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, and they did all kinds of tests. And then they told him he had a very short time to live, like 3 months. So we came home and were devastated, basically, that we got that news. And so we both got very quiet, and we got into a state of acceptance. And then, of course, what happened was the previous hospital called and said, "We have a liver for you." So he went, and when they opened him up, he had so much cancer inside him that he really should not have been given that new liver. But the doctor, who was the surgeon at the time, knew that Tom had been trying very, very hard to get himself in shape for the operation and everything else. And so he said, "We're going to give him a chance." So they put in the new liver, and within 24 hours, Tom was up and walking, and he is now a personal trainer. And so I was left with this life. I had been fired from my job as a teacher, and I had been a caretaker for everybody for so many years. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. So I asked my higher power, I said, help. And what I got was write. So I went with Tom to a conference, and I took a notebook and I started writing by the side of a pool while he was in the seminars. And I got most of a book written in those 5 days.
Wow.
And that book is my second novel, When the Moon Winks. I don't have that right with me, um, but the first book that was published was called The Book Sisters. That was one that's a kind of about these six sisters, and it's not really biographical, but it's so I have The Book Sisters was my first novel. Then When the Moon Winks was my second novel, but I wrote that first. And then I had a book of poetry published called Taking an Air. And then I have How to Remodel a Life. And I'm working on a children's, well, young adult book right now, and the sequel to When the Moon Winks. So I'm kind of busy.
Sounds like a full plate. Do you have a book that's your favorite or that is more special to you than the others?
I really love How to Remodel a Life. I love the idea of it, the whole taking the the idea of remodeling and putting it with a life. I think that's really a really cute idea. I was really tickled that I came up with that, or that somebody gave me that idea. Um, and I'm really glad that it could be useful to people, that it's not just some kind of beach read or whatever, which is always fun, which some, one of the other books is, but this one is actually, it's my heart and soul. And it's the book I've been waiting to write all my life, I think. So,
Wow. Wow. Well done. All right. We've got another question from Diane. She's one of our affiliate leaders in Rutherford County. When did you know it was time to quit alcohol use, and where did you reach out for help, or how did help find you?
well, when I was 24 years old, I was a teaching assistant at a writers conference in Maine. And I went up there with a Volvo station wagon full of spring water because I was determined not to drink anything while I was up there and make a fool of myself. And as soon as I got to the seminar, to the workshop, the director, welcomed me. And then he said, I'm going out to get some beer. You want to come? And I was off and running. And I ended up, sleeping around with everybody there and being really ashamed during the whole thing. And there was this guy there who was cute and from California. And I figured, oh, I'll just have a relationship with him. So I kind of chased him down, and he kept putting me off and putting me off and putting me off. And I'd bang on his door. I'd be drunk and banging on his door, and he wouldn't answer the door. Um, and then one day he came by my room and he saw all the bottles littled over my room. And he said, I know some people who can help you. And it turned out he was a recovering alcoholic, and he took me to my first AA meeting. And he helped me get sober. We never did have a relationship. He just was someone who was put in my life to introduce me to AA. And I don't know where he is or whatever happened to him, but it felt like one of those God shots that comes into your life and gives you just what you need.
Now, I know sometimes it takes people a while to find the right AA meeting, and that was kind of your experience. Could you talk about that? Because I think it's so important that people keep trying and check out different meetings to find a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different, especially now I mean, I got sober in 1981. There weren't as many meetings. There were certainly more than in the 30s, um, but there are so many meetings now, even Zoom meetings. There are so many different types of Zoom meetings. And what I was always told was you should, that alcoholism is a three-pronged disease. It's like a three-legged stool. It's a disease of the body, the mind, and the spirit. And so you should go to step meetings for the mental, speaker meetings for the physical, and just no discussion meetings for the mental, speaker meetings for the physical, and step meetings for the spiritual. And so I would try to go around to different meetings like that. And um, I think they always say that if you are at a meeting and you get a resentment, just go start another meeting, just take a coffee pot and start another meeting. But um, there's some truth to that. But the other part of it is that if I'm having trouble with a meeting, um, I need to first look at myself and see what is the issue here. If I'm feeling out of sorts, like people don't like me, like I'm isolated, like I don't belong, is that because I'm not reaching out and I'm not in the middle of the pack? I'm not trying to do service work. I'm not introducing myself to people. I mean, it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. Yes, AA is welcomes people in and we hug and we do all those things and stuff like that. But um, it really is a two-way street. So I think as far as finding the right meeting, any meeting can be the right meeting if you're in the right mindset. If you find a meeting you really don't like there's stuff going on there that you don't like, if there's a lot of crosstalk or negativity or something like that, just find another meeting. And there are so many around that, that would be easy to do. During this Zoom time, I live in North Carolina, but most of the meetings I go to are up north because that's where I'm from originally. So I feel more comfortable going to meetings up there than necessarily down here. And we have people on those meetings that are from Ireland and Oregon and all over the place. It's a lot of fun. So Zoom is a great opportunity to join meetings and look around and go to Australia if you can't afford the ticket and do that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Right on. I've had similar experiences reconnecting with friends in Columbus, Ohio. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I get to see them every Sunday again.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions from the virtual studio audience asking about your children and family. Do you feel like sharing on that topic?
Sure. I have 3 kids. I have a son and 2 daughters, and um, they're all great kids. They have never seen us drink. They've certainly seen us with our isms of alcoholism, but they're very gentle souls, and I think that they have benefited from having been around the 12 steps all their lives. One of my daughters, they're all achievers. They're all have good careers, and um, one of my daughters does suffer from anxiety and depression, and it's heartbreaking sometimes to see the pain that she goes through. Um, but I can't do very much for her. All I can do is listen and feed her back some of the stuff that's in the book. And you know but really all she wants is from her mother. All she wants from me is not a lecture. She doesn't want me to try to recruit her into some program. She just wants to tell me that she's not feeling very good that day. And that's where I've learned how to listen and and all I can do is pray for her and pray that she'll have some relief from the tough times when she goes through them. So, but she's very good about trying out new medicines and trying to stay on them and all that stuff. So, yeah. So that's my 3 kids. Then we have 2 dogs that are neurotic and a cat that is equally neurotic. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a scene in the book where you were writing and you had your beagle Quinn by your feet. So,
Oh my gosh, she is a trip. She is a trip.
but going back to your thoughts about supporting a daughter who lives with depression and anxiety, that gives me a good opportunity to plug the NAMI Family to Family class. For anyone who is not familiar, NAMI offers free classes and support groups all around the country, really, including North Carolina. Family to Family is an 8-week class for if you have a friend or a loved one, family member who lives with mental illness. It goes over the diagnoses, what mental illness looks like, how we can be supportive, and how we can take care of ourselves as well. So check that out if you haven't already. Let's see, looking to see if we have any other. Oh, yeah, I guess this is a little different from the other book question. One of your comments in the book was you referenced a pervasive dust worthy of Steinbeck, worse than Dust Bowl dust, talking about clearing the dust and laying a good
Yes.
foundation. Who are your biggest literary influences?
My biggest literary influences, well, I have to say Shakespeare is one of them. Steinbeck, I adore. Um, right now, I'm really enchanted by Kirsten Hanna, who wrote The Great Alone, which is a great book. That's a terrific book if anybody hasn't read that. I love short stories by sort of little known authors like Andre Dubus and Antonio, I can't even remember his last name anymore. Well, okay, it just slipped my mind, but Arturo Vivanti, that was his name. He wrote beautiful, just lyrical short stories. And poets, I love Mary Oliver. Her poetry is exquisite. I'm very influenced by her poetry. Robert Frost, I love his stuff. I'm kind of eclectic. I like whatever has a nice cadence to it and some kind of thought that goes on in there. I'm pretty much attracted to. So, but as far as influences go, I'd say Mary Oliver for my poetry, and then the children's book that I'm writing right now, the young adult book, was influenced by some books I read when I was a young person myself. The 5 Children in It and the E. Nesbit books. They're from England. And my father was British, I should say. That's why all this British stuff. But The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, another beautiful book. Just so many. The Wind in the Willows definitely impressed me with its beauty. So I love beauty. I think beauty is truth. Truth, beauty is. I think somebody said that.
Yeah, that's ringing a bell to me too. I think you
Coleridge
wrote,
or somebody.
yeah, Ode to a Grecian Urn.
You're right.
Right. Which came to mind because it was just in your book, so it's top of mind. And nice note from my boss, I love the graciousness and flow of Hope's language. So such a warm and engaging audience we tend to have. So virtual studio audience, if you'd like to ask a question, we're getting to the point of speak now or forever hold your peace. Sometimes we go 60 minutes, sometimes we go 90, or anywhere in that range is fine. We go with the flow on Thursdays with NAMI. Did you have anything else you'd like to share, Hope?
I'd like to share a poem. I put a few poems in my book. And I do have another book of poetry that I'm trying to get published right now called Postcards from an Elusive God. And anyway, so this is the poem that's at the very end of the book. It's called The Conversation. If I came face to face with God, sitting this very minute at our old wooden table, scarred and burned by casseroles and knives, I might be inclined to be forward and tell him not to be gentle with me. There is no need. But underneath my worn silk blouse, my heart would flutter, and I would plead, be kind, be kind. I say I am not afraid of death. It's losing life that scares me. Black void of no feeling, no being, ceasing to exist. Like the space in my mind when I can't remember something. I would miss blackberry cobbler, hot from the oven, hugs from my children, spring birds early in February breaking winter's shell, purple violets embroidering the newly green lawn. This isn't over yet, the conversation between us.
Really magical imagery. Yeah, that's a poem that I'll walk around with for a while. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to read? That was lovely.
Sure, I'll read the poem. I think it's in here. I'm very sure it is. Maybe it's in this one, Blybrook. I was asked to go to England to read a poem over there. At a festival. And so my husband and I went, and we had a wonderful time hiking in the Malvern Hills and walking along the Thames, and just we really enjoyed it. It was beautiful, and then I got to read at this poetry festival, and it was really fun. So this is called Blybrook Falls, Vermont, and this is kind of like, to me, a metaphor for the journey that I've been on in my life. You have to walk a rocky path, careful not to twist an ankle or stumble and fall, the stones tripping you up like character flaws, reminding you to be patient, careful, mindful. Your legs will burn, your thighs will be on fire as your heart throbs inside your chest like a grandfather clock, every beat felt resonating through your body to your brain. You will bump your head on the low branches and fallen trees that arch over the path, cursing. You will traverse streams over slippery stones, telling yourself you'll fall. Don't fall. You've got this. As your sneakers get soggy and your toes are wrinkled, your throat will be parched, your spirits will lag. The path, both beautiful and endless, will beckon you. Sprays of feathered ferns and soft emerald moss, gurgling brooks and mushrooms popping up from the loamy forest floor. Trios of tiny mustard-colored parasols, shelves of honey caps lining rotting trunks, filmy white pipes, huge prehistoric platters will catch your eye as you trudge, swatting mosquitoes, still wondering why you came. Then the air will grow thin. You will push through blackberry bushes, excited. Suddenly, you are there. A vertical river of white pouring out of the sky. Heaven slides down through the trees like a frothy bridal train. The water thunders, whispers. Don't look for rainbows. There are none. Only the magnificent falls, dappled with sunlight, toppling through this sea of green.
That really captures the different facets of life, from running the gauntlet and having so much pain to then just that splendor. Um, yeah, very lovely. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not seeing additional questions, so I'm going to start to do my thank yous and my wrap up. I'll start with you, Hope. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us and sharing your insights and your story with us. It's been very inspiring.
Thank
And
you
we
for having me.
appreciate you. And our executive director, Gary Kreitz, I think Hope is a Celtic bard. Another comment, you paint beautiful word pictures. So, all right. Another Thursday evening has just flown by. Please be well in the week ahead and do observe social distancing. Go where you need to go and do what you need to do to be safe. Thank you, virtual studio audience and Facebook attendees, for being with us tonight. It's been a wonderful conversation, and have a safe week ahead. And Merry Christmas.
You too. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.